Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Nemhauser, and yes, it is misleading. That is Hawk Blogger Mornings. Normally, we've done this 2 o'clock afternoon slot on Sundays because we welcome in Rob Staten from across the pond, and it's still morning for him, even if it isn't for us. But Rob, I think, is traveling abroad and doing his real job this Sunday. So excited to bring back in Griff Sturgeon and gonna get a little extra quality time with Griff and Sturgeon. How are you doing, man?
Doing well, doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's been clamoring for when are we gonna have another crossover pod. These are folks seem to really enjoy when we can get this group together, and we might get Jeff Simmons on at some point. Who knows? He has been traveling, and he as well may or may not make it. But I think folks like the eclectic group of perspectives that we can bring to this Seahawks season. And man, how do you feel like just about training camp time? Last time I talked to you must have been like a month ago. So what's gone on in your life before we get to Seahawks stuff? Anything fun happening over the summer for you?
No, it's been pretty mellow. We were talking before we went live. I've been going on hikes as I am wont to do. And for the past 2-3 weeks, I've had like 4 or 5 bear sightings, hiking in the woods, off trail, walking. I don't know what it is, but they've just been like popping out. I think July is bear season, black bear season, but they're very bold and just getting into people's trash cans or whatever, eating salmon berries. But yeah, I've been seeing a lot of bears.
Yeah, it's definitely getting to be salmon berry season everywhere I'm going. I'm seeing those around. Where roughly are you going where you're running into all these bears?
Issaquah Alps, so
Okay.
squawk, cougar, tiger area.
Yeah.
It's like that whole belt. They just kind of, they go from mountain to mountain, I think, and check, the streams divide all 3 mountains. So
Now you have dogs, right?
yeah.
Are you generally taking your dogs on these hikes?
Often, yeah, not every time, but I'll take them with me. And if they see a bear, I've got one dog just does not care at all about them.
Uh-huh.
He has no response. It baffles me. Then the other dog, she wants to go hunt them, so I
Uh-huh.
have to wrangle her in. And then my third dog's a little afraid of them. So I've got 3 distinct responses from each of them.
Are these and I'm not going to out you if it's against rules, but are these all on leash at this point, or
Yeah,
like
they're all leashed. I keep them on leash. I didn't used to because the trails that they used to be so sparsely like hiked.
Right.
The COVID changed just habits and stuff. So now the trails are always packed. So now I just keep them on leash just so they don't want to go say hi to everybody.
See, that's the thing. I've got this little, medium-sized dog. He's probably like 20 pounds, 23 pounds, something like that. And it's so nice to have him off leash. Like he's really well behaved. He stays right on my heels. But I don't know if I run into a bear, is he going to take off after the bear? Is the bear going to take off after him, or whatever else? So I only will find out once.
Right.
So,
it's learn the hard way.
You learn the hard way. Hopefully I don't. But yeah, I've not run into bears yet. So but definitely been doing some great hikes. And it's been amazing. It's been an amazing summer. I know maybe drier than the region needs, but it's been nice for getting outside. That's for sure.
Definitely.
What about Seahawks stuff? What's happening over at Seattle Overload podcast? You and Maddie been breaking anything down?
Yeah, we looked at Kayvon Wallace's tape. We try to finish up the free agents. It's been a slow trickle from us trying to do live tape watches on those guys. We looked at Kayvon Wallace. Can't remember who else we looked at. We looked at Tyrell Dodson. We looked at Jerome Baker. I think we're gonna get into the guys that they re-signed. So Leonard Williams, we're gonna do him next. Just to kind of recalibrate like who we view Leonard Williams to be, like how good is he type of a conversation. which that one will be just kind of confirming what we already know. It's just nice to circle the wagons on, how good of a good player you got is, yeah, so I think that will primarily be our content outside of as news trickles in and transactions occur or don't occur, stuff like that throughout the summer.
Out of all there's a lot of interesting names. Some guys that I think are going to be pretty pivotal for this team. Any things that you learned by doing that kind of maybe changed your opinion or enhanced your opinion of any of those guys?
Yeah, so Kayvon Wallace is a really interesting player because of all the safeties on the team. He has the most like juice. He whatever that word means to you, he's the most talented, and he's always been a high energy player everywhere he's been. And if you pay attention to how Philly fans talked about him and Titans fans talked about him, they always talked about him like he was on the brink of being something more than however they previously perceived him to be. And so he really is capable, but the flip side of his kind of aggressive coin, or the flip side of that coin, is that he can be a little erratic. He can make the wrong decisions at times. As we were watching his tape, though, we kind of reflected on the fact that he hasn't been able to stay on one team and stay in one system. And sometimes can that be, well, because he didn't earn his way? Or can it be if you get bounced around a little bit, the whole journeyman thing becomes like self-reinforcing? You become a journeyman because you're a journeyman, not because maybe you should be. It's like a lot of it's just circumstance. Like you have to get your opportunity to stick around. And maybe things just haven't fallen in his favor, things kind of out of his control, but also maybe not. You can only really determine that if you're privy to all the behind the scenes stuff. But he is an intriguing player, an interesting player, versatile player. I am curious to see what McDonald does with him, and especially how he fits him around Love and Jenkins.
Yeah. I'm glad you saw that. I as well was, when they initially signed Kayvon Wallace and John Schneider did his normal. Yeah, we didn't think we'd be able to get both him and Rayshon Jenkins, but we did it, and it's kind of like, all right, John, like Kayvon Wallace is just a guy. And when I look back, I'm like, well, he's actually maybe the best deep safety of the three of them in terms of his movement skills, and then it seemed also like, I don't know if you saw this, but Arizona, it seemed like that was not a good scheme fit for him. It seemed like Tennessee, he at least last year was a little bit in better positions to make plays and seemed to pretty quickly acclimate there versus Arizona. But yeah, he seems like as a third safety, seems kind of promising. At least someone that has some, as you said, some juice and some upside that I think most people might not realize.
Yeah, definitely. He kind of, I like using baseball analogies for how do we characterize players, because baseball, it's so easy to measure players. He honestly kind of reminds me of like Jared Kelenic, in that he's got undeniable talent, capability. There's such a wide spectrum of what's possible. It just hasn't, he can't just stick with it, right? We all know the story with him. So I kind of view him in that sense. Like Kelenic is way more talented than Ty France at his best, right? When Ty France was consistently good for those 2 or 3 seasons. But Ty France, you know what you're getting with him. In theory, that's what Julian Love is, right? The good version of Ty France. But with Kayvon Wallace, you're looking at Jared Kelenic level potential. So it's just, can the right coach, right system, right circumstance, where he can get his snaps, he can find his roles, and he's not fitting around established players, established veterans, like he was Arizona, Tennessee, and toward the end in Philadelphia, because Philly had safeties. That wasn't their problem.
Right.
They took him in the mid rounds, like, all right, interesting player. What can we do with him? So I mean, I do think that bad luck is a variable in his career to this point for Kayvon. So I don't know. Could he end up out snapping one of these guys, or matching the snaps of one of these guys?
I know. I think Maddie might have been on one of Coach Cody Alexander's shows. I don't know if you've done with him as well, but I think Maddie was on talking about maybe the new schemes in Seattle. Anyway, but when I talked to Coach Alexander, he kind of thought that Kayvon Wallace and Rayshon Jenkins should be the starters at safety, and it doesn't look like necessarily that's how it's going to work out. But that was an eye opener for me. And it sounds like to you think that there's at least some merit to that conversation.
I definitely would at least approach it with being open to the idea of there being a heavy rotation, or at least if you're going to have sub packages, let each guy like own a role. Like this guy will be the big nickel that intermixes with Devin Witherspoon at nickel. This guy will be the boundary safety. This guy will be the when we want to go into dime, because say we want to spell Tyrell Dodson or one of the linebackers, we want this guy to be the hook player, kind of the Cam Chancellor-ish role of a safety. Let one of those guys own that role, and then you play the other guys around him accordingly. That would be pretty cool. Like, oh, okay, they're in nickel now, they're in big nickel now, they're in dime, they're in big dime. Who's playing linebacker in big dime? Okay, it'll be this safety. Who's playing deep when they're in regular nickel? Okay, it will be that guy. Type of thing. So I am curious to see how that takes shape. There will definitely be some trends there as far as alignments in certain personnel packages, and there's enough interchangeability with these guys, but also enough differences in their skill sets to where I think McDonald can kind of pick and choose a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of like, how will it play out? I am very curious to see how the snaps work out with these three and the alignments.
If you or anyone listening hasn't heard the Kayvon Wallace interview, I think it was, I want to say Wyman and Bob. This is probably a couple months ago at this point, but man, he's a funny guy too. He's a character. Yeah, he was talking about the Eagles at the VMAC. He'd never seen he called them the Whiteheads, I think, and saw them like catch a fish, and he was just like, he talked about it with the awe and splendor that I think a lot of us in the PMW like to hear about. People really, really getting taken by the outdoors. So endearing guy. I'm definitely cheering for him. I know that Julian Love has been a guy that for you hasn't always been a guy that you think that highly of. Not that you've been super critical, but just maybe not as positive on him as some other folks. I'm curious if you've heard, the conversation. I mean, Leslie Frazier went on Move the Sticks with Dan Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks. He was singing Julian Love's praises, thinks that people are going to really know him as a really great player coming out of this year. Hugh Millen, who I know people have very polarizing perspectives on, he was asked, like, okay, who do you think's really going to benefit from Mike Macdonald's system? Every time someone asks that, I always assume the answer is Devin Witherspoon. I mean, that just seems like the obvious answer. And so it sticks out for me. He said Julian Love. He thinks Julian Love's in a really good spot relative to how Mike Macdonald's going to use him. High IQ guy. What's your current kind of stance on Julian Love and what kind of player you think he can be for Seattle?
Well, first, with regards to those comments from people that, in the media that are close to the team and the coaches, it makes sense that Julian Love would be impressing at this point in the process, because his strengths, like, again, the classroom stuff, the football IQ, communicating on the field, I think those are his strengths as a player. His IQ, his communication on the field, and that really shines through when you're only practicing or when you're only in, and that matters. That translates to the field. I do think, though, that allows for his strengths to kind of bubble to the surface more than maybe other safety strengths. Not that Jenkins isn't a high IQ guy also, but Love has incumbency. He's relaxed. He knows the facility, the staff, the returning players. He has a lot going for him in that sense. So it doesn't surprise me necessarily. I will say, though, like, I don't know Frazier that well. I don't know how well or how often what he sounds like when he's talking about his players. So I don't have a lot of context for how he talks about guys. Like, over the years we learned Pete Carroll, right? But I was surprised by how effusive in his praise he was about Love. Like, he was really laying it on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, I mean, Julian Love in New York was a good player, in my opinion, like mildly above average. So if he's just showing that level of play, that level of really consistency, then all right, cool. Maybe he is back to what he was. I just think that, I mean, really, if I were to characterize him last year in Seattle, it was just inconsistent. He showed the stuff he did in New York, and then he also showed not the stuff that he did in New York, in my view. can you chalk that up to coaching or whatever went wrong in the lines of communication last year from the coaching staff down to the players, in that feedback loop, or whatever went wrong, maybe that won't happen again this year with McDonald coaching and Frazier and Carl Scott having another year with these guys. Can he be more consistent? If he is more consistent, then he's definitely a valuable player. So, yeah.
I love no intentional pun utilization there, but I love that there's starting to be Seahawks conversation and Seahawks content again that's kind of starting to wake up. And I also love having folks on the show that don't always just see things the same way I do. Otherwise, it gets really boring, right? Like I like hearing different perspectives. And you and I, as much as I've always liked following you and liked your content. You and I often don't agree on certain players, or it's not uncommon for that to happen. So that happened again last week. I think it started with Corbin Smith saying that he thought the Seahawks really should think about bringing back Quandre Diggs. And you quote tweeted that saying you agree. And I think, if I'm remembering right, you said, I think if Quandre was signed, he would be potentially the second or third best defensive player on the roster. Am I remembering that right? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And I was like, awesome. I don't agree. I don't see it that way. I kind of brought up that I see Quandre as a guy that fell off last year overall, and that especially struggled in defending the run. And there's a bunch of back and forth about that. I wanted to bring that up here because I wanted to hear a little bit more. It's not surprising to me that you were a proponent of considering bringing Quandre back. It did pique my attention that you thought he could be the second or third best defensive player on the roster if they signed him. So I want to hear a little bit more, both about what you think Quandre would bring to this roster if they did make a move like that, and why you think he'd be that highly valued as a player if they brought him back.
Well, first, hearing my own words read back to me, second does feel a little rich. I didn't think about the D line when I said that.
Oh, okay.
So if I, you throw in Leonard Williams, maybe Nwosu, I might say tied for third or fourth or fifth in that range. So yeah, let me heat check myself there.
That's fine. That's fine.
So
I'm not trying to corner you. I'm not Skip Bayless.
It's good. It's good. I mean, that's the whole point of disagreement, that you temper yourself a little bit, right?
Yeah.
The way I characterize him is that in coverage, I mean, he's still 90% of whatever his peak self is in coverage. And I just think that's immensely important. I know that Cody Alexander mentioned that his man coverage isn't as good, but there's 80 snaps there. He has only been targeted 4 times. When he is played in man, it's not like they're spinning him down. He's playing one-on-one in the slot with the guy. He's usually playing he's playing deep center field, which is the same deep center field in cover 3. So there's no differences for the free safety there. Or he's playing down in the low hole where he's robbing space. And I think he's really good at that. So I don't know if the way that man coverage is measured will necessarily capture what he does well there. But generally speaking, I mean, he's a rangy safety. He possesses a skill set that none of the 3 other big safeties have. So he would fit a hole, the hole that was left by his exit. And I mean, just to be blunt, when it comes to deep cover safety, so they're cover 3, cover 1, playing the deep middle, or playing to the field when you have to play cover 2 in your space where you're tasked with a lot of space, and you have to prevent those go routes, those posts, those seams, those deep overs. I mean, he's on my short list of safeties that I want. I think he's still exceptional at that. And he's not he's a 4-5 guy. He's not a 4-4 guy. He's a 4. He does it with footwork and tape study, and just because he knows what he's doing. A lot of his best games, you rarely see him on the screen on the broadcast. A lot of that happened with Earl Thomas too. If the ball isn't getting thrown deep, he's doing his job and earning his paycheck, roughly speaking. For the run defense, I do agree that there are fewer positive plays that he made, impact plays, ever since that injury. And I definitely concede that point. As far as the negative plays go, though. My perspective, like, I'm not suggesting people aren't seeing the negative plays. Like, no, like, I'm not saying your eyes deceive you. That's happening. But what I am saying is that for the most part, he's always had those negative plays, or the capability, or the possibility of those negative plays being there. But those possibilities only rear themselves if other guys aren't doing their job. So if everyone else is doing their job, his negatives against the run wouldn't matter that much, because he wouldn't be in those positions to make those negative plays. So what I'm saying really is the numerator didn't grow, but the denominator did. And therefore the numerator just follows along at the same rate. That's kind of my perspective there. So I also don't know, like, just, I do wonder, like, how much does it matter? Now, there are some cases of the whole cultural aspect, or the when there are plays where he kind of shuts down with his body language when other guys are messing up and he's just standing there. Is like, is that what you want to see? But then, is it chicken or the egg? Are they not playing well because he's not being a good leader, or is he kind of expressing himself that way because things around him are just such a mess and he's just throwing his hands up like, what the hell, what's going on here? I don't know. So I think that it's kind of, my response to them bringing him back would be, if they do sign him, clearly, if they were to re-sign him, they don't think those kind of subjective factors are a big deal. If they don't, maybe they're like, yeah, we really want to move on and just turn the page. You know what I mean? So it would be a little like post result analysis, I guess.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, if you had asked me between Quandre and Jamal, who is more likely that the Seahawks might bring back prior to, like, after they cut him, but prior to them saying anything at all, I would have probably thought it was Quandre. Like, I think I would definitely say where you and I have some common ground on this is that I don't think Quandre's washed, or like a player that you can't. I'm not a never Quandre guy or anything like that. I think that he still does have a lot to offer as a deep middle safety. I do question whether some of his best skills would be utilized as much in this scheme, and as much too deep as they're going to play. It doesn't mean obviously he can't do it, but some of the things that they might be using a middle of the field safety for, I'm not sure they'll be utilized quite as much under McDonald as was utilized previously. But then they really only talked about Jamal Adams. They haven't really mentioned anything about Quandre, or like they were open to having him back. They talked about Jamal that way for sure, mostly as a linebacker. And so I kind of take note in that. I also, to be honest, Griff, I thought he would have signed with the 49ers by now. Like, I thought that was kind of a hand in glove. He or Justin Simmons would sign there, because they're not going to get Gibson back, who's also, suspended. And they've got a really young safety group, and they've benefited by having some vets, and they're going for it. So I kind of thought he'd end up there. It's surprising to me that as of now, neither one of those guys have found a roster spot. And the thing that gives me most pause about Quandre, the number one thing, is the run defense aspect, where I acknowledge that's not the most important part of especially a deep safety's job. But he was really bad at it. Like, there was a number of plays I saw where what would have been a 3rd and long turned into a 3rd and short because Quandre missed a tackle, took a bad angle, wasn't in the position to make a play. And I think that the team just can't afford that really much at this point, if they can correct it with others. And then the other thing is this, I think he's made a number of business decisions over not just last year, but the last couple of years. And I hear you on what could be the reason behind those. Maybe and honestly, either one of those reasons doesn't work for me. If it's because the things around him are crap, I'd expect someone in his position, especially paid at the top of the team and his seniority, to be the guy making the Earl Thomas plays at the 1 blade of grass line, the 1-inch line of the goal line with all effort, than the guy that just kind of pulls up and lets someone run by him, or doesn't get in to get his nose in there. And so that, for me, I think is really contagious in a negative way and
Mm,
is pretty damning, especially from a leadership kind of position. So I personally would rather him not be back on the team. I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't be like angry if he was, but I'm kind of excited by this younger, different breed of safety with some different talents that might be utilized a little bit differently. And I'm even kind of interested in, and we'll get into this when we get into the roster projections. I'm interested in some of these deeper on the roster safety options. I think Jonathan Sutherland has a potential to be a really interesting safety. I
yeah,
think Kobe Bryant, we don't really know. There was a bit of an experiment, then it got stunted. Maybe he's
yeah,
got something. Ty Okada, like there's some interesting guys in that room. So I kind of like cheap, young, different for at least this season.
yeah, yeah. I definitely understand that notion, and I'm generally like with you on that. Um, it's I kind of hold my desire for Diggs to come back, simultaneously with also liking the idea of the youth movement and having younger, cheaper guys. Just, I mean, I'm down for any of it really. I think is more my perspective. It's more like I understand the decision behind cutting Diggs contracts. You're trying to reset things.
Mm-hmm.
You're really setting yourself up rosterized 2025 and everything. It's more like if you can make it work, I wouldn't be. I don't think they should shy away from dabbling in that area. Um, yeah. So
I hear you. I hear you. Anything else before we get into roster and kind of like breaking down what we think the 53 man roster will likely be? We might even get to some practice squad projections. We're gonna go maybe extra credit here. Anything else over the last month that has stuck out to you, either from a news perspective or from a tape study, film perspective, that you feel like you know now or have some thoughts about now that you maybe didn't a month ago?
um, one thing. So I've the conversation around the run defense. I don't know. I really just have no idea what. Um, I really have no idea what the run defense will end up looking like. I think Mike McDonald, again, is the best coach they could have hired. I think he is indeed one of the 3 or 5 best defensive minds in the sport, at least at the NFL level. But I don't think that means the run defense improving will be a foregone conclusion. He coached 34 regular season games in Baltimore. And for 17 of those games, they have bottom 5 run defense. For 17, they have top 5 run defense. And comparing and contrasting the talent, I think at least at D-line, Seattle right now is maybe even more talented at D-line than Baltimore was last year. Actually, I feel pretty good about that. So my positive line of thinking is that, well, one, we have a better D-line, but then also we've never even seen Leonard Williams and Uchenna Nwosu play together yet. That could be really, really exciting. And Nwosu is a phenomenal player against the run and just a really good all-around player. That's really exciting. But then the negativity comes in from the linebacker situation. I mean, I think the 2 guys that they have, the slated starters, are good run defenders, but they're hurt. But then I also don't think they're good enough run defenders that the weaknesses of McDonald's front structure, that they can necessarily overcome that. And that front structure is why I think Baltimore had kind of sinusoidal run defense. But then I also thought, well, it even gets even worse translating that to the NFC West, because there's heavier formations in the NFC West than there are in the AFC. There's more flexibility. McDonald didn't defend the run well against Shanahan or McVay last year, although he did well overall, I'd say. So there's just a lot of things are up in the air. They're not concerns. They're just more open questions.
Mm-hmm.
And what gives me even more pause is that in Baltimore, he had elite talent in the back 7 and elite pass defense because he coached it to that point as the backstop. He can't bank on anything right now in Seattle. The only thing he can bank on in terms of production, I think, is that his pass rush will be really productive. So he'll have to leverage that to his that and the cover talent out of the corner. So it's really just, there's a lot of things that are wide open in terms of how is he going to scheme, what are the results going to be. I'm totally embracing that there might be some high variability early on. So I'm not going to be, making any grand statements myself the first 8 weeks of the season. I am very curious to see how the scheme and the team take shape, though, for 2024. It's a whole lot of I don't know, basically.
Yeah. That's the fun part, right? I mean, and I've been going back and watching all the Baltimore games from last year, and I started with the Dolphins game. And then I watched the Rams game. I'm intentionally picking some ones where there's maybe some significant challenges for that defense. And that Rams game, for people that didn't watch it, everyone talks about how good Matt Stafford was in that game, but the Rams opened up that game with 8 straight runs against that Baltimore defense.
Yeah.
And they just ran Kyron Williams kind of up the middle, which was kind of interesting to me because the way when I've watched that Baltimore defense, the way it seems to be set up is they have a lot of beef in the middle, and they really kind of invite you to run to the edges. Like they're kind of pushing you, funneling you to the outside. And so I would think outside zone and some of those would be more potentially effective against that Baltimore defense. And that's obviously where San Francisco excels. But at least in the Rams game, they were running pretty much up the middle. Devon Achane in the Miami game opened up that game with like a 45-yard run around the edge, was pretty productive for a little while. They eventually contained that Miami defense. But I think a lot of folks think bad run defense and they think weak up the middle, like people are just going to run it down your throat. But if you remember, I know you do, when the Seahawks had a very good run defense a few years ago, and then it regressed, it wasn't that the middle of the defense was a huge problem. It eventually became a big problem that season, but it started with them not being able to contain runs over tackle, outside tackle, around the edge. And it was a real problem. And so I think that's where the linebackers are going to come in. That's where Tariq Woolen and his run defense, if they're going to target him, can come in. And so there's parts of this run defense. Everyone focuses on the defensive line, but there's parts of this run defense that are going to be tested if they go outside the edges that are different names. And I am curious about how they'll hold up as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Me as well. I think, again, Nwosu being back, you can scheme with so much assurance with him on the field because he erases like schematic problems. Like if on paper you're weak here or weak there, he just erases it because he can work. He knows when to work backdoor. Like he knows when to cheat. He knows when to break the rules because he knows when he should and when he shouldn't. He can also just stack a tight end at 255, stack up a tight end and just get into the backfield. He can give a tackle trouble. I mean, he's not going to 2-gap on a tackle, but 1-gapping, I mean, he's really just annoying to block. He can slip the block. He can play it straight up. He gets into the backfield. If he's not making the tackle, he's letting somebody else do it, affecting the ball carrier's back path. So his loss last year was just, I couldn't have fathomed how important that was, but it really crystallizes how good he was in the first half of the season. And then also the importance of the depth kind of taking a step up. I think I've lost faith in Darrell Taylor finally, but Derek Hall, I think he'll take a year or two jump because he has all the traits. He has all the effort and the want to. It's just he was not ready for NFL speed, like processing wise. Like he would bull rush a tackle and get 3 yards of depth, but he's not staying horizontally aligned with his near defensive tackle. And he's screwing up everybody. He's screwing up the linebacker. He's screwing up the safety that's fitting from deep. Everybody, even though it looks good in terms of flashing his traits. So it's like, it's not a Taylor situation where he just doesn't have the traits to defend the run. He just needs NFL experience. So that's why I'm bullish on Hall, because I feel like he has too much working for him and it will catch up in time. So there's things like that. And then Boye Mafe, year 3 for him. I think he can even leapfrog Nwosu as a player overall. Just because he has the ceiling that Nwosu doesn't quite have. So the edge group could materialize to be a strength this year. I don't fault the edge rostering last year at all. I just think that Nwosu injury just caused a series of events that really screwed them over in ways they couldn't have foreseen. I think that they have a little bit more insurance against that this year via the development of the younger players. So edge, they should be good. But speaking to the overall question of losing contain and stuff, like for Baltimore and all that, and I've said this before, but like it can't be taken for granted that it's hard to defend the run if you act like the run doesn't matter. I'm not suggesting McDonald doesn't. But when we say the pass is more important than the run, that's true. But when we look at the numbers that shows, though the run isn't as effective against the pass, those numbers reflect a league that is still defending the run, though. If you stop defending the run, like just take offenses rushing numbers on 3rd and long. A 6-yard run on 3rd and 8 isn't going to do anything. They're going to punt most likely. But 6 yards per attempt, if you were to see 6 yards per attempt, you go, oh my God, their run defense is horrible. It doesn't, right. EPA-wise, it's not good because you're not converting, right? But if you defended the run on 1st and 10 like you did on 3rd and long, you're going to get gashed. Now, all of a sudden, the run game is as good as the passing game. A 6-yard gain on 1st and 10 is positive EPA, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's a little extreme because 3rd and 8, you know, they're in a double NASCAR package. The average weight is like 270 pounds on the D-line, et cetera. But just to, you know, to use extremes to illustrate the point, it's hard to defend the run with only 4 bodies on the line of scrimmage paired with a 2-deep shell. It's hard. And the McDonald knows how to do it, but even he can't sustain it for 17 games without elite personnel. He had good personnel in his front 7, but not elite personnel. So you kind of need players that are rule breakers. Like Michael Bennett was a rule breaker. You know, Aaron Donald breaks rules. Matabuike is a rule breaker because they're worth 1.5 guys out there, you know? So I am really curious to see how he adapts to Seattle in the NFC West.
Yeah. There's no doubt he will be tested on that front. Even in that front, in that case, Arizona, who is kind of a fascinating team. Talk about an eye of the beholder team. You've got folks that are like, hey, Kyler Murray could be in the MVP conversation. You've got folks that are like, no, this is clearly the 4th out of 4 teams in the NFC West. But in any event, most people talk about, when they talk about the Cardinals, they talk about Kyler Murray. They talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. Mm-hmm. But what was effective for them last year was James Conner, and that offensive line was better as a running team. And when I I started looking at specifically red zone rushing teams. That was the number 1 red zone rushing team from an effectiveness perspective in the NFL last year.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, the NFC West is not a place that you want to be weak in run defense if you want to be competitive. You will get exposed.
Definitely. And honestly, we might come to learn that the Cardinals have really good coordinators on both sides of the ball as they get more talented. Mm-hmm. They might end up becoming household names because I like their game plans. They started each game that I watched like 4 or 5 Cardinals games last year, 2 of them being the Seahawks games. When they opened the game, it's like they're doing all the right things. They're pressing all the right buttons. It just didn't matter in the second half because they just don't have the players.
Right.
I really hope that they don't get super talented because they could easily be the team to rise to the top in a couple of years.
We'll see. I mean, it's these last 2 years. If I'm a Cardinals fan, these last 2 years have been the years where either they've built the championship foundation of young talent, the amount of high draft capital and total draft capital, top 100 picks the last 2 years,
right.
It's kind of unheard of. And so if those guys do all hit, or a lot of them hit, then yeah, they could be scary. My gut feeling was they kind of blew it. I think they blew it by trading away and getting Paris Johnson. I don't think he's that good. He certainly wasn't that good as a rookie.
Agreed,
and I think they might have blown it this year. We'll see how their corners come out. Like if Max Melton ends up being really good, if some of the other guys that they drafted was Elijah Jones, I think they have some names that I wasn't as high on, but if those guys turn out, then yeah,
sure.
they got it. But in any event, main point is you're right. I think NFC West is a place that run defense matters. And the Seahawks have that to figure out. We got a super chat from Hawks fan Matt Man, one of our YouTube members. A good time to remind folks, if you haven't already liked and subscribed, please do. It takes just a second and appreciate it. Also, make sure you go over to Seattle Overload Podcast, like and subscribe there as well for Griff and Maddie and all the work they do. A great place to catch up on Seahawks content. Hawks fan Matt Man asks, I'm wondering what kinds of things Griff would need to see to judge McDonald's first season a success.
So he is the head coach, right? Like even though he's a defensive coordinator background and he'll be calling the plays, his job is to run the team. So I won't be judging him just based off of the results of the defense. he's responsible for the offense to a degree as well, right? That doesn't mean he'll be calling plays or be meddling or whatever, but part of that job is managing his subordinates. So if that means, ruling with salutary neglect and just letting Grubb do whatever he wants, and the offense is really good, then that was a good decision by him as a head coach. So I am really concerned about the O-line, but still there's enough talent there that the offense should be good enough to carry even a bad defense. And then if McDonald is everything that he's cracked up to be, I think as a defensive mind, I think the defense should be, I think average is attainable. I think being worse or better than that are both possible, but I think average is what we should be like realistically rooting for. And, taking on the plus side of 10th ranked offense and an average defense, I mean, they should win 10 games. So if they win fewer than that, I'll be a little unenthused. But like a 10-7 season, wild card appearance, maybe win one game in the playoffs, even if they lose, whatever, I'd be like, all right, that's a pretty darn good year for a rookie head coach, especially the youngest head coach in the league. So I don't have any like lofty expectations, but I'm not going to be like holding his head to the fire if it's, they don't make noise in the playoffs either. So
I'll tell you, Griff. I've been as bullish on the hire of Mike McDonald, Ryan Grubb, Scott Huff, the offseason in general as anybody. I mean, I'm quite bullish on, given the scenarios of opportunities of who they could have come out of this offseason with, Byron Murphy, Christian Haynes, Mike McDonald, all these guys. I'm very, very excited. At the same time, you ask me right now, they're the third out of 4 teams in the NFC West. I think that's to say anything else, I think is being disingenuous. I think the Rams have, a better quarterback, better offensive line, more proven young talent across more positions. And they've got a coach that has proven time and again that he can give scheme advantage and play calling advantage game in, game out. So while I think the Seahawks could finish ahead of the Rams, I don't think that's crazy. I think this is the third out of 4 teams in just the NFC West. That's not even talking about the rest of the NFC. Obviously, the Lions. I love what they've got going on over there. I like Green Bay and what they've got. Like, there's a lot of teams, so I'm not unrealistic about where this team fits in the whole scheme. But there is this in the error bars of probability for this group, for this coaching staff, and for this roster. I think the high end of that is higher than most people outside of Seattle really realize it is or give it credit for. And I think the probability that they end up on the higher end of their spectrum of outcomes is higher than a lot of folks are giving it. So that's kind of where I'm at, like bullish, but trying to be realistic and certainly looking forward to getting my eyes on these guys coming up in training camp in a few days.
I mean, I totally think it's possible that they win 12 games. Like that's totally feasible in my view. It might be, less likely than winning 10, but that's totally within their grasp. That wouldn't be like a, whoa, where did that come from thing. To me, that'd be like, no, that was just them playing to their ceiling all year long. So
can I interrupt you there for a second?
Yeah.
And then we'll get into the roster stuff. Give me a couple of things that would have to happen, either players specifically that would have to play to a certain level or whatever comes to mind. What do you think is really the key to them being on the top end of their probability, top end of their kind of spectrum of outcomes for this season?
It's Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas staying on the field. And that doesn't even mean they flower into top 10 tackles themselves, but that's just give league average. And I think if they stay on the field together, they're going to be like in that 8 to 12 range of tackle pairings as a group, as a duo. I think that's all Geno needs. If he can work the pocket with that assumption that, okay, the edges are okay, barring the occasional Max Crosby, Michael Garrett's of the world, just they're going to beat anybody. Barring that, he can manage an overturned interior with the receivers they have, the scheme they're working with. I think that alone can get them, the offense can do a carry job at 12 wins, provided the defense is competent. And the defense should, the one word to characterize the defense that we should at least expect to use is competence. So Just don't be a disaster on defense. I mean, I think they'll be much better than competent, but just I'll take competence, right? Where you're clustered with the median, you know.
Yeah.
It's tackle health.
Yeah. I think that's well said. And I did a show, might have even just been yesterday, but maybe it was Friday, regardless, where I went through, hey, here's the here's the starting lineups if there was no injuries. And the offense, obviously, offensive line, it's not a lot of guys at this point that you could say are even average starters. On defense, the inside linebackers where they are now is way below average. John Radigan and Patrick O'Connell.
Yeah.
But everyone else, and if you get into a dime situation where some of those guys are coming off the field, I feel like almost everybody across every position is at least league average, if not above league average. And some of those guys are solidly above league average. So it does feel like when I reflect back on it, I think the defense was more a case last year that the sum was less than the parts. Yeah. And I don't know that I'd say the same thing about the offense. And so that is, if that's true. And I think one of the key guys is this Derek Hall thing that you brought up. He was a 0 last year, pretty much. If he's actually like, if he's productive, if he's like a plus, it's a very, very, very different edge group than it was last year. So let's get into the roster. We're gonna get into our 53-man roster predictions. The way we're gonna do this, Griff, we're gonna kind of run through this. We'll have some brief conversations as it comes up, but let's go through some of the simple ones first. We'll talk about who you keep, and I'll go with you. I'll let you tell me who you keep and what the numbers are at that position. So the names and the number, and then I'll tell you if I've got anyone different. Sound good?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, let's start with quarterback. Who are the quarterbacks you keep on the 53-man?
Quarterback. So I'm going with Geno Smith and Sam Howell. Just those two.
That's what I got as well. Okay. Running back.
So I'm going light at running back, only 3, Walker, Charbonnet, McIntosh. And then I think they'll carry. I think Helani will make the practice squad, and then they probably bring in some outsider running back to also be on the practice squad. I think they go light at running back.
Why do you think that?
I don't think it's going to be a team that they're going to be airing it out. They're going to be throwing a lot. The run game is going to be important, very important, but it doesn't mean they'll be high volume. I think when they want more snaps in the backfield that will, like auxiliary snaps that will be sourced from the receiving room, the tight end room, they can put Derek Young in the backfield. They can even do some interesting stuff with Bobo. I think we'll see Barner and Westover in the backfield and Fant as well too. So when they want more kind of pseudo 21 looks, pseudo 20 personnel looks, they'll be pulling from the other position groups.
I like that. I currently have 4, so I have Helani making it. But I really like the notion you've got there of potentially. I think they're heavy at tight end with guys that are roster worthy that I don't have currently making it. And I could see them expanding that number to do exactly what you're saying. Westover, we've talked about, maybe as a Kyle Juszczyk, like not just a tight end, but an H-back. We know Pharaoh Brown has also played some fullback in his career. So that's an interesting notion. Makes sense to me. Let's go wide receiver.
All right. So wide receiver, I have them carrying 7, at least to start. So Lockett, Metcalf, Smith and Jigba, Bobo, Young, and then Chenault Jr. Can I count? Is that 6? No,
that's 6. That's 6.
All right, and then Eskridge 7. Eskridge was my 7th, I think.
Okay. So you got.
I might have switched it and I forgot that I switched it.
That's all right. Yes, I'm looking at your sheet right now. Currently, you've got 6 highlighted, and then you've got Eskridge on practice squad.
All right, I think I did end up. I think I changed that late because I wanted to carry 10 at the line. So yeah, okay. So 6 receivers.
Okay, 6. So you've got Chenault and Derek Young making it. You've got Eskridge on the practice squad. We'll come back to the practice squad in a second, but. Yeah, I think you and I are so far pretty similar. The difference so far, running back, I'm keeping 4. I'm predicting that they keep 4. 6 receivers, and then tight end as we kind of move into that group. I think that the Eskridge thing with Chenault Jr. is going to be really interesting. We'll see how that fares out as far as return men, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we both do not have D. Eskridge making the roster currently. All right, tight end. Who you got there?
Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown, AJ Barner. So just the 3 for now.
All right. And then I've got the same 3 on tight end. Offensive line.
So I went with 10 at O-line. Charles Cross, Lucas, Haynes, Fant, Timmy, Bradford, Tomlinson were my locks. And then Nick Harris, kind of backup center. And then Laumea, kind of the backup tackle, kind of replacing Forsyth as high confidence. And then I put McClendon Curtis on the bubble, but him being the 10th guy. So I was struggling between Curtis and Ankrum Jr. I think Forsyth is worthy of making it. I think they just want to move on for the sake of moving on and get new blood in there.
Yeah.
I do think Forsyth is a good backup tackle as backup tackles go. He's played real snaps. He has NFL experience. You just don't want him out there for too many games.
Yeah. I think that's a fair characterization. I think he's a mid backup tackle. You know, but I think given where his contract, he was drafted the same year as Eskridge. Given the choice between him and Raekwon O'Neal or Curtis, one of these guys that they might have longer contract control with, I think they'd go with one of those guys.
Right.
So I also have them keeping 10. I have them keeping McClendon Curtis and Raekwon O'Neal. And I have Ankrum not making it, Laumea, Jarrell, Greenfield, none of the Stone Forsyth not making it. The reason I have Raekwon O'Neal right now, partially because of what I just mentioned, partially because he has been backing up at right tackle, I believe, second string tackle. Okay. And I'm just wondering, I know he was playing second string, and I think it was right tackle, but he was getting earlier snaps than I expected. So I'll see when I get eyes on, but that was one thing. Curtis feels like he's getting number 1 snaps. It's funny, Griff. I mean, is there a chance he doesn't make the roster? I think we both think there is, even though he was getting number 1 snaps.
Yeah.
And Ankrum's an interesting one because he's been backing up Tomlinson at left guard. These other guys have not been, and they signed him as a free agent deal. It'd be pretty quick to cut him, but that's where the conversation's going to be. I mean, I don't think they keep 11. That seems crazy. But it would be pretty good. I would be happier with your keep than I would be with mine, because I'd love one of Laumea or Jarrell or Greenfield to actually play so well that they force themselves onto the roster.
Right. Because the ideas of those players are more exciting.
Yes.
Right. The depth at O-line was way more spicy than I thought it was going to be when I was trying to make decisions. Right. Yeah. And what you mentioned on a previous episode that I was on, that like Schneider keeps name dropping O'Neal and Curtis for a reason. So whatever they've seen in practice from him, they must really admire. So they'll probably be making noise, at least as much noise as backup second string O-line make, you know?
Yeah. I think that's going to be a quiet but much watched battle, at least by some of us obsessive folks. Okay, let's move on to defensive line. And just for folks listening, a reminder, this is nose tackle and defensive ends in the 3-4, not edge outside linebackers. And for the purposes of this process, we are considering Draymond Jones an outside linebacker, not part of this interior defensive line group, even though he will likely get a number of snaps along the interior defensive line. Right. All right, so what did you have on the defensive side?
Line. I had six big guys in there. So Leonard Williams, Murphy, Reed, Morris, Hankins, and Cameron Young. I was debating leaving Young off, but I don't think they give up on him. I think they will next year, though. I don't think he fits I just don't think he's special enough, and that they don't have a role for him that's important enough to that lens toward that his skills lend toward enough to keep around. But I just feel like they think it'd be a little too early to just outright cut him. So I think they go with 6 there. Yeah.
Yeah, this is you and I started in the exact same place. I had them keeping 6 as well, and I had those same 6. And then I went back and I looked at what McDonald has kept the last 2 years in this position. He kept 4 one year.
Oh,
He kept
wow.
5 the other year.
Okay.
So he has yet to keep 6 in the NFL as a defensive coordinator. If they don't keep 6, then I think Cam Young's on the outside looking in.
Right. I think part of their if at least from Schneider's perspective, part of his rationale for wanting to keep more bodies on there than normal is because he's looking to the future. Reed probably won't be on the team next year. Hankins definitely won't be. And he wants the mirrors to those players kind of already in there for continuity's sake. Again, it's not that hard to find Jonathan Hankins every offseason. I mean, you can do it, but I think in a perfect world, Young would grow into that. Also, Matt Gotel, who I have as a practice squad guy, he could be that guy next year as well. So
agreed. I totally agree. All right, let's move to inside linebacker.
All right, so I have them only keeping 4, at least for week 1. I assume Dodson and Baker get healthy. So Baker, Dodson, Tyrese Knight, and then I cut John Radigan in favor of Patrick O'Connell to be the 4th guy.
That's interesting. That's a bit off chalk. Why O'Connell?
So O'Connell in preseason last year, to me, he was the best of the linebackers that were not like the main guys, not Bobby and Brooks, and I can't remember who the other guys were, but I mean, to me, he's like he's a very skilled player. He knows what he's doing. He's really smart. Just unfortunately, he's cursed by not being very fast. Otherwise, like, he knows what he's doing. Like, he's a professional. He's a pro. He's just unfortunately too slow. He's like a 4.8 guy who knows what he's doing. You know, if he was a 4.4 guy or 4.5 guy, he'd be a 2nd-round pick type of situation. But to me, he's a much more put together player than Radigan as an actual linebacker. Special teams is its own beast, though, and Radigan seems to make noise there. So maybe they'll prioritize him over O'Connell for special teams reasons. But if O'Connell had the spot start, I wouldn't feel terrible about it. Over a larger sample, though, you'd start to see the problems probably with him playing more.
Yeah, I'm not as quite as I definitely agree with everything you said, other than I'd be comfortable with occasional spot start. I don't see that for him as being a good thing, but I kind of imagined Easton Gibbs and Patrick O'Connell would have this kind of battle. I think they're similar players, and Gibbs being on the NFI list isn't great. Like, hopefully he comes off pretty quickly and we get to see what he can provide. But unhappily, I've got them keeping 5. And by the way, Mike McDonald has kept 5 in this role the last 2 seasons. And the idea that they're going to cut, I mean, maybe a Cam Young even, and keep John Radigan and Patrick O'Connell is not comfortable to me, but that's what I currently have them doing. So we're a little bit different there, but let's keep going. Edge, outside linebacker, edge. Who you got? So
Nwosu, Mafe, Derek Hall, Dre Jones, and then I had Darrell Taylor on the bubble. So I have them keeping 5. And I still suspect Jones will be a flex player. I think he'll still play inside some, maybe more on later downs. But so they're keeping a lot of beef on my 53, and I don't know if that's what they want long term. So we could see changes made throughout the year. Of course, injuries are also always a factor, but I do think they give Taylor another go. I wanted to cut Taylor and promote Nelson Caesar, because I really like him as a pass rusher. I think he's legit. I think he can play. But I think they're confident they can stash him on special teams, and they give Taylor one more real shot to prove himself. So
yeah, this is we're pretty much aligned so far. It's interesting listening to the Bootleg Football guys talking about Sonny Anderson as well. They're like big Sonny Anderson fans, and I've been more on the Nelson Caesar bus, but like they're like, Sonny Anderson's going to make their 53. I'm like, really? All right, really? Let's see.
I gotta watch this guy then.
I know, right? I got to from Grambling, so
Okay.
we'll take a little bit more look there. But you and I are the same. I think Darrell Taylor does squeak on the squad. Cornerback.
Cornerback was tough because there's so many arguments to be made for like 8 guys probably. But I had Witherspoon, Woolen, Brown, and then I cut Jackson and Burns in favor of James and Pritchett. I think all
Wow.
full-blown youth movement.
Wow.
I don't know if they can practice squad Jackson. I don't know what the eligibility there is.
You should be able to. I think there's no real restrictions on vets anymore.
Okay, right. So I think they keep Jackson around kind of like on their ghost roster thing, their practice squad deal, and with the intent to bring him back if someone gets dinged up or something. I don't think they're quitting on Jackson at all. I think he's an intriguing skill set still. And really, I feel the same about Artie Burns. It's just age, and someone's got to take one for the team. So, but yeah, I think that if Pritchett can stay healthy and James can stay healthy, I think they'll give them the nod and try to work with them from ground zero, coaching them up.
So how many do you have? You have them keeping 5?
Yeah. Witherspoon, Woolen, Brown, James, Pritchett.
Interesting. That's a small number.
It is a small number.
I've got them keeping 6, and I have Jackson and Burns making it. I have DJ James making it, Nehemiah Pritchett on the outside looking in.
I see that for sure.
And like I think, to be clear, if again, similar to what we were talking about with the offensive line, if James and Pritchett beat out Burns and Jackson, that's pretty good news in terms of the future of the team and the future of the roster. My guess is that it'll be a little hard for them both to do that, and they might be more practice squad kind of guys.
Right.
All right, safety. Last spot here, and then we'll kind of overview it. Practice squad.
So I went 5 here: Julian Love, Jenkins, Kayvon Wallace, Jonathan Sutherland, and Kobe Bryant. And I thought maybe will they think about Kobe Bryant as a corner? Will they take him back to his college days? I don't know. I'd be intrigued by that. But I suspect not. I suspect he'll be a safety still. But
yeah. I mean, he does give you some flexibility there for sure. Sutherland, I have him right now. I've got 4 guys making it. I've got Sutherland above Bryant. How crazy does that seem to you? Do you think that that Bryant's clearly ahead of him, or is that a possibility?
I mean, I suspect that the coaching staff and the front office will probably weigh Bryant's NFL experience over Sutherland. But from what little we have seen of Sutherland, he intrigues. He's versatile. He can play in the box. When they last year, the way they schemed the big nickel, they was effectively functioning like a box safety. And Sutherland played that role really well. Like he was processing his physicality for being, what is he, 205? Not necessarily a super dense 205 guy. He's just really natural in tight quarters. We haven't seen a lot of his like deep cover stuff, but he just kept popping to me. And I remembered I remember wanting to emphasize in my mind last preseason, I think Jarek Reed and some of the other safeties, the younger safeties, and I kind of wanted to dismiss Sutherland. So I'm like, no, I'm excited about these other guys. If he's making plays too, does that mean the other guys aren't as exciting? The mind games we play with ourselves. But then I realized slowly, like begrudgingly, I was like, no, he's actually just doing as many cool things as they are. And I was rooting for him to eventually get real NFL snaps, and I think he got hurt. But yeah, so I definitely think he might be he might be like a diamond in the rough. It might actually be the big nickel answer. Not that he'll be as good as Kyle Hamilton, but he could play the Hamilton nickel role and do decently in it.
Last thing, Griff, I've kept you a little longer than I expected. Appreciate the time. Let's talk. Like we generally pretty much agreed. There's a few guys here and there, but kind of back end of the roster. I think offensive line is probably the place where it's the hardest to predict. What about practice squad? What are the guys for you that currently that aren't making the roster, but you have maybe find their way onto the practice squad?
So George Halani definitely makes it. I think Eskridge, Hayden Hatton are like high priority practice squad receivers. Maybe Winston Jr. I don't know enough about the other guys. I think Westover is like a high priority practice squatter. I think they'll keep Mabry around on the practice squad. He's just a good guy to call up, you know, when you need to eat snaps. I don't know if Brady Russell gets another shot. I don't think so there. But I think a lot of offensive linemen will make it. So O'Neal, Ankrum Jr., Jarrell, Greenfield. I think they'll probably carry 4 or 5 O-line guys. And then I think Gotel makes it. I would like Miles Adams to stick around because I like him as a player. I think there's potential there, but I just think the numbers aren't in his favor.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson Caesar, I imagine, has got to be a big priority there. Probably Anderson as well. And then at inside linebacker, it's like just whoever's left, really, because they got to have someone there. So maybe Radigan again, Gibbs, and then at safety, Ty Okada. But I'm sure someone will emerge that we haven't really gotten to know yet, especially at safety, that they'll keep around on the practice squad as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting crew. I got PJ Walker on the practice squad. I don't know what the rules are exactly for the emergency third quarterback, but I assume that's a practice squad spot. I have D. Eskridge not making the roster and not being on the practice squad, which might be a little bit eye-opening for some. I've got Aesop Wiston, Hayden Hatton, and D. Williams. The reason I got D. Williams over D. Eskridge, Williams is a punt kick returner, which I think is primarily where Eskridge has some potential value at this point. And so I think they might go for the younger guy, at least for the beginning. I've got Jack Westover. Brady Russell, Tyler Mayberry, kind of like pick one or the other. I agree with you. I like Mayberry better as a tight end. Russell maybe is a little bit better in some areas of special teams. But you know, either one. I've got Lamea, Jarrell, and Greenfield on the offensive line. I'd Cam Young not making the team, but making the squad. Drake Thomas, Nelson Caesar, Sonny Anderson, Nehemiah Pritchett. So one of the rookie corners makes it. And then I got Kobe Bryant and Ty Okada. Almost all the time with practice squad, you're going to get guys from other teams that Schneider likes better or picks up. So that's always a possibility as well. What was the hardest thing for you to pick doing this pre-training camp process?
You know, I think the hardest position group where I toiled the most was in the trenches, O-line depth and then D-line depth. I think that was toughest for me.
Yeah.
How about you?
I mean, the D-line thing, when I found out the 5 or 4 number, that really set me back. I was like, whoa, I don't know what I'm going to do here. And also, I think that corner is going to be a really, like the top end is pretty clear. The bottom of that could really be a bunch of different ways. I think the back end of the receiver room, I assume Jake Bobo's a lock, but there's a lot of receivers on this group that have different strengths and could play a role. So yeah, I agree with you in general. The line, the 2 lines were really hard to kind of figure out. It is a total jumble behind kind of the quote starters on the offensive line for sure. All right, Griff, before I let you go, are you going to be making your way to any of the training camps?
No, I won't be able to.
Well,
I'd love to, though. How about you?
We'll miss you. Yeah, I'll be there starting Wednesday, and we'll be sharing some coverage. So hopefully folks will get some insights from that. But man, it's been great catching up with you. We will keep this going as much as we can. And everyone should give a lot of crap to Jeff Simmons. He texted me that he forgot. He totally spaced. So you need to get at Real Jeff Simmons and let him know that he was missed on this pod, but not that much, to be totally honest. It was pretty nice getting all this quality time with you, Griff. Here's to you, hopefully, man, not running into any bears that are a little bit more aggressive than the ones you've run into. And tell folks where they can find you and Maddie and Seattle Overload and anything you guys got coming up in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I do a podcast with Maddie Brown called Seattle Overload. You can Google it, YouTube it. We do live streams of tape watches. Then we also just kind of do more audio-based episodes where we just kind of talk about whatever and wherever the conversation goes. We're both on Twitter, so you can just look us up there. He's Maddie F. Brown. I'm C. Mike's Spin Move. If you're watching this, you're probably already acquainted with me, though, on Twitter. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Definitely check them out, Seattle Overload, and check them out on Twitter. Griff, dude, it was great catching up. Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday.
Likewise, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, take care. Everybody, give the show a like, click subscribe, become a Patreon member at patreon.com/hawkblogger. The audio version, ad-free, will be up a moment after I finish this show. And I will see you all tomorrow morning. Be sure to tune in Tuesday and throughout the week. Danny Kelly from The Ringer will be on. I'll be having Mina Kimes on. We've got a bunch of folks coming, so a lot of good stuff, and training camp's right around the corner. So cheers to everybody. Have a great rest of your Sunday.